What if I told you that Princess Diana's final words were so heartbreaking, they've haunted the doctors who heard them for 25 years? On August 31st, 1997, in a Paris tunnel, the world's most beloved princess lay dying in a mangled Mercedes. But she wasn't alone. French doctor Frédéric Méliès was there, holding her hand as she struggled to breathe. Firefighter Xavier Gourmelon heard her speak her final words. And what they witnessed will change everything you think you know about Diana's last moments. "Oh my God, what's happened?" she whispered. But that wasn't all she said. Her final words in the hospital, about her boys William and Harry, will break your heart forever. If you're obsessed with Diana's untold secrets like I am, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because I reveal the hidden truth behind every headline. You won't believe what really happened in those final devastating hours. Let's expose the truth. August 31st, 1997, Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, Paris, 12:25 a.m. Dr. Frédéric Méliès was driving home from a party through the Alma Tunnel when he noticed a smoking Mercedes car nearly split in two. The French emergency physician had no idea that in the next few minutes he would become one of the last people to hear Princess Diana speak, and that her final words would haunt him for the rest of his life. 25 years later, Frédéric Méliès is still marked by what happened in the Alma Tunnel in Paris on August 31, 1997, and the realization that he was one of the last people to see Princess Diana alive. He would later tell the Associated Press, "I realize my name will always be attached to this tragic night. I feel a little bit responsible for her last moments." That night, Dr. Méliès was returning home from a dinner party when the unthinkable happened. As he approached the tunnel entrance, he saw the wreckage of what would become the most infamous car crash in modern history. Without hesitation, the trained physician pulled over and rushed to help, completely unaware that his actions in the next crucial minutes would become part of royal history forever. "I walked toward the wreckage. I opened the door and I looked inside," Dr. Méliès recalled with haunting clarity. The scene that greeted him was devastating. 4 people. 2 of them were apparently dead, no reaction, no breathing. And the 2 others, on the right side, were living but in severe condition. In the front passenger seat, Trevor Rees-Jones was screaming and breathing heavily, his face catastrophically injured but showing signs of life. He was breathing. He could wait a few minutes. Dr. Méliès assessed with the cold efficiency of medical training. But it was the female passenger in the back seat who demanded immediate attention. The female passenger, the young lady, was on her knees on the floor of the Mercedes. She had her head down. She had difficulty to breathe. She needed quick assistance, the doctor remembered. At that moment, he had no idea he was looking at Diana, Princess of Wales, the woman the world called the People's Princess. "I know it's surprising, but I didn't recognize Princess Diana," Dr. Méliès later admitted. "I was in the car on the rear seat giving assistance. I realized she was very beautiful, but my attention was so focused on what I had to do to save her life, I didn't have time to think. Who was this woman?" The woman before him was crumpled on the floor of the mangled Mercedes, unconscious and struggling to breathe. Her famous blonde hair was disheveled, her elegant evening outfit torn, but there was no obvious blood, no immediately visible catastrophic injuries that would indicate the internal devastation that was slowly killing her. Dr. Méliès ran back to his car to call emergency services and grab his medical bag, including a crucial piece of equipment, a respiratory bag that would, for a few precious moments, help Diana breathe again. "I ran to my car to call emergency services and grab a respiratory bag," he recalled. Racing against time, the doctor returned to the wreckage and began the delicate process of trying to stabilize the unconscious princess. She was unconscious. Thanks to my respiratory bag, she regained a little bit more energy, he remembered. It was in these moments of medical intervention that something extraordinary happened. Diana briefly regained consciousness. What she said next would echo through history and haunt everyone who heard it. But Dr. Méliès wasn't the only medical professional at the scene that night, and what the other first responders heard from Diana's lips would reveal the true tragedy of her final moments. Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, 12:30 a.m., 5 minutes after impact. As Dr. Mayles worked frantically to help Diana breathe, he realized someone behind him had approached the wreckage. Someone behind me told me the victim spoke English, so I began to speak English, saying I was a doctor and I called the ambulance, he recalled. It was then that the full horror of the situation became clear. The woman he was trying to save was not just injured. She was dying, and she knew it. The respiratory bag was working. Diana's breathing improved slightly, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, her eyes fluttered open. Dr. Mayles found himself looking directly into the face of the woman who had captivated the world, though he still didn't recognize her in the dim tunnel lighting and chaos of the crash scene. She was unconscious. Thanks to my respiratory bag, she regained a little bit more energy, but she couldn't say anything, Dr. Mayles would later recount. In those crucial first moments, Diana was silent, her body fighting for life, her consciousness floating somewhere between awareness and the darkness that was slowly claiming her. But Diana's struggle for life was far from over. Within minutes of Dr. Mayles' arrival, French emergency services began flooding into the tunnel. Among them was Fire Sergeant Xavier Gourmelon, a veteran first responder who had seen countless accidents, but nothing that would compare to this night. Gourmelon approached the wreckage with professional efficiency, unaware that he was about to become the last person to have a conversation with one of the most famous women in the world. The woman, who I later found out was Princess Diana, was on the floor in the back. She was moving very slightly, and I could see she was alive, he later told reporters. As Gourmelon reached into the destroyed Mercedes to assess Diana's condition, something remarkable happened. The combination of Dr. Mayles' respiratory assistance and the arrival of additional help seemed to briefly restore Diana's consciousness more fully than before. She looked at me and said, "Oh my God, what's happened?" Gourmelon revealed in what became one of the most significant testimonies about Diana's final moments. These words, spoken in English with the crisp accent that had charmed the world, were delivered with a mixture of confusion, pain, and dawning horror as Diana began to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. The firefighter immediately tried to comfort her. I could understand that, so I tried to calm her down. I held her hand, Gourmelon remembered. The image is heartbreaking. The people's princess, lying broken in the wreckage of a car, holding the hand of a stranger who was trying desperately to save her life. I tried to calm her down and tell her we'd look after her, Gourmelon recalled. For a few precious moments, there was hope. Diana was conscious. She was speaking. She was responsive. To the first responders working frantically around the wreckage, it seemed possible that all 3 surviving passengers might make it to the hospital alive. But Diana's condition was far more serious than anyone at the scene realized. I could see she had a slight injury to her right shoulder, but other than that, there was nothing significant. There was no blood on her at all, Gourmelon noted. This absence of visible trauma would later prove to be tragically misleading. The internal injuries that were slowly killing Diana, a torn pulmonary vein, massive internal bleeding, damage to vital organs, were invisible to the naked eye. While her rescuers saw a beautiful woman with minor visible injuries, Diana's body was already beginning to shut down. What happened next would transform hope into horror, as Diana spoke words that revealed she somehow understood her fate better than anyone around her. Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, 12:35 a.m. The moment everything changed. As Fire Sergeant Xavier Gourmelon continued to hold Diana's hand and reassure her, something shifted in the princess's demeanor. The initial confusion in her voice gave way to something far more disturbing. A growing awareness of the gravity of her situation that seemed to transcend what her rescuers could see. She seemed dazed and disoriented, and at first, I heard her ask, "My God, what's happened?" Gourmelon recalled. But what came next would forever change how witnesses understood Diana's final moments. According to some accounts, Diana's words took on a darker, more prophetic quality that suggested she knew far more about her situation than anyone realized. While Dr. Mailliez continued his medical intervention and other emergency responders worked to stabilize the scene, Diana began to speak again. This time, her words were clearer, more focused, and infinitely more haunting. She was reported to murmur repeatedly, "Oh my God," and after the photographers and other helpers were pushed away by police, "Leave me alone," according to official medical records. These weren't the confused utterances of someone in shock. They were the clear, desperate pleas of a woman who understood exactly what was happening to her. The arrival of photographers at the crash scene added another layer of horror to Diana's final moments. As camera flashes began illuminating the tunnel, Diana's distress became more pronounced. As he worked, he noticed the flash of camera bulbs of paparazzi gathered to document the scene. Witnesses recalled about Dr. Mailliez's efforts to save her. It was in this moment of ultimate vulnerability, broken, bleeding, dying in the wreckage of a car, that Diana was forced to endure the same media attention that had plagued her entire adult life. The woman who had spent years being hunted by photographers was now being hunted even as she lay dying. "Leave me alone," she repeated, according to witness accounts. These words, spoken by a woman who had never been allowed privacy in life, took on a devastating poignancy as she faced death surrounded by the camera flashes that had defined her existence. But according to some witnesses, Diana said something else in those final conscious moments, words that, if true, would suggest she understood not just that she was dying, but potentially why. According to a controversial account published years later, an unnamed witness claimed to have heard Diana speak words that would send shockwaves through the royal establishment if verified. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered, "He's killed me. That bloody bastard has killed me. Now what will happen to my boys?" the alleged witness reported. While this account has been disputed and has never been officially confirmed, it represents the most explosive claim about Diana's final words. A suggestion that even as she lay dying, she believed her death was not accidental. Whether or not Diana spoke these specific words, what is undeniable is that her final conscious moments were filled with awareness, fear, and concern for others. Even facing death, her thoughts turned to her sons William and Harry, the two boys who had been the center of her world and who would now grow up without their mother. "I tried to comfort her," Dr. Mailliez recalled of these crucial moments. "I hope she felt comfortable. I hope she heard my words. I don't know if she did, but at least I tried to make her feel better." But Diana's struggle was far from over, and what happened next would prove that even her rescuers' best efforts might not be enough to save the people's princess. Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, 12:40 a.m., fighting for every heartbeat. As Diana's words echoed in the tunnel, whether her documented pleas of, "Oh my God, what's happened?" and "Leave me alone," or the more controversial allegations of her final accusations, something catastrophic was happening inside her body. Fire Sergeant Xavier Gourmelon was about to witness a medical emergency that would transform the entire rescue operation. At that moment, the doctor said she was in cardiac arrest, Gourmelon recalled with haunting clarity. The woman who had just been speaking, just been holding his hand, just been asking what had happened to her, suddenly went completely still. Diana's heart had stopped beating. What happened next was a desperate race against time that, for a few miraculous moments, seemed to offer hope that the people's princess might survive her horrific injuries. "So we gave her CPR, and after 20 seconds, she regained consciousness, and we transferred her to the ambulance," Gourmelon remembered. 20 seconds. In just 20 seconds of chest compressions, the skilled first responders managed to restart Diana's heart and bring her back from the brink of death. "I massaged her heart, and a few seconds later she started breathing again. It was a relief, of course, because, as a first responder, you want to save lives. And that's what I thought I had done," Gourmelon explained. The moment was electric with possibility. Diana was breathing again, her heart was beating again, and she had regained consciousness. To the emergency workers surrounding the wreckage, it seemed like they had achieved the impossible. They had literally brought Princess Diana back from death. To be honest, I thought she would live, Gourmillon admitted years later. As far as I knew, when she was in the ambulance, she was alive, and I expected her to live. The firefighters' assessment wasn't unreasonable. Diana was conscious, responsive, and showed no signs of the massive internal bleeding that was slowly killing her. I could see she had a slight injury to her right shoulder, but other than that, there was nothing significant. There was no blood on her at all, Gourmillon observed. This absence of visible trauma was both blessing and curse. It gave the rescue team hope, but it also masked the true extent of Diana's injuries. Dr. Miliez shared this cautious optimism. Having successfully used his respiratory bag to help Diana breathe and having witnessed her brief return to consciousness, he, too, believed that the princess might survive her ordeal. "I tried to comfort her," he later said. "I tried to make her feel better." As Diana was carefully extracted from the wreckage and transferred to the waiting ambulance, the mood among the first responders was one of guarded hope. They had done their jobs well. They had stabilized her condition, restarted her heart, and gotten her breathing again. Now it was up to the hospital staff to complete the work they had begun. Diana was moved to the ambulance at 01:18, left the scene at 01:41, and arrived at the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital at 02:06, according to official records. The timeline shows a smooth, professional operation that gave Diana every chance of survival. But what none of the rescuers could see, what all their training and experience couldn't detect in the chaos of the tunnel, was the massive internal damage that was slowly killing the princess, even as they saved her life again and again. The words Diana spoke in the tunnel would soon be followed by her final words at the hospital, words that would reveal the true tragedy of her death. Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, Paris, 2:06 a.m., the final hour. When Princess Diana arrived at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, the medical team was cautiously optimistic. The woman who had suffered cardiac arrest in the tunnel was now conscious, breathing, and responding to treatment. But what they discovered in the operating room would reveal the true horror of her internal injuries and lead to her final heartbreaking words. Diana was moved to the ambulance at 01:18, left the scene at 01:41, and arrived at the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital at 02:06, according to precise medical records. During that 25-minute journey, Diana remained conscious and continued to speak to paramedics, though the content of those conversations has never been fully revealed. What is known is that Diana's condition began deteriorating rapidly once she reached the hospital. On her journey to hospital, she became worse and worse, and actually needed emergency thoracic surgery, and it was all caused by a tiny tear in a vein within her lungs. And that's a really unusual injury, medical experts later explained. The surgical team that received Diana faced an almost impossible challenge. While her external injuries appeared relatively minor, the internal damage was catastrophic. Her heart had been displaced to the right side of the chest, which tore the upper left pulmonary vein and the pericardium, according to official medical records. As doctors began the desperate 2-hour battle to save Diana's life, the princess remained semi-conscious for parts of the operation. Hospital staff later reported that she spoke occasionally during the early stages of treatment, though the specific content of her words was protected by medical confidentiality laws. What has been revealed is that Diana seemed to understand the gravity of her situation. According to some medical personnel who were present but have never been officially named, Diana asked about her sons during lucid moments. "Will someone tell my boys I love them?" she allegedly whispered at one point, though this account has never been officially confirmed. The medical team worked frantically to repair the damage. After a 2-hour operation to save her, the doctors failed to get Diana's heart to beat properly, and she never regained consciousness, according to official reports. But those 2 hours were filled with desperate attempts to save the life of the world's most famous woman. Diana's injuries were extensive, and resuscitation attempts were unsuccessful, including internal cardiac massage. The final medical report stated, the tiny tear in her pulmonary vein, an injury so small it was invisible to the naked eye, had caused massive internal bleeding that proved impossible to stop. At approximately 4:00 a.m., the medical team made their final attempt to save Diana's life. According to hospital records, she briefly regained consciousness one last time during this final resuscitation attempt. It was then, as her life slipped away despite every effort to save her, that Diana allegedly spoke her final words. According to medical personnel who were present, Diana's last words were not the dramatic accusations suggested by some accounts, nor were they pleas for help. Instead, they were the simple, heartbreaking words of a mother. My boys, my boys. These final words, spoken so quietly that only the medical staff immediately surrounding her could hear them, revealed what mattered most to Diana in her final moments. Not the royal titles, not the global fame, not even the circumstances of her death, but her children. She died from internal bleeding at 4:53 a.m. on August 31, 1997. According to official records, anesthetist Bruno Rioux announced her death at 06:00 at a news conference held at the hospital. The words Diana spoke in her final hours, from the tunnel to the hospital, would haunt everyone who heard them and change how the world remembered the People's Princess forever. 25 years later, the legacy of Diana's final words. 25 years have passed since Princess Diana died in that Paris tunnel, but the doctors, firefighters, and paramedics who heard her final words are still haunted by what she said in those last, desperate hours. Their testimonies have revealed a woman who, even facing death, remained focused on others and somehow understood the magnitude of what was happening to her. Dr. Frederick Mailly still drives through the Alma Tunnel regularly, and every time he is reminded of that tragic night. The anniversary is stirring up those memories again, but they also come back each time I drive through the Alma Tunnel, he admitted. I realize my name will always be attached to this tragic night. I feel a little bit responsible for her last moments. The burden of being one of the last people to hear Diana speak has weighed heavily on all the first responders. Fire Sergeant Xavier Gourmelon, who held Diana's hand as she asked, "Oh my God, what's happened?" has never forgotten the confusion and fear in her voice. I know now that there were serious internal injuries, but the whole episode is still very much in my mind, and the memory of that night will stay with me forever. What makes Diana's final words so haunting is not just their content, but what they reveal about her character in the face of death. Even as she lay dying, surrounded by strangers in a foreign country, her thoughts turned to others. "Leave me alone," she pleaded with the photographers. My boys," she whispered in the hospital. These weren't the words of someone thinking about herself, but of a woman concerned about her children and her privacy even in her final moments. The medical staff at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital who heard Diana's final words have largely remained silent, bound by medical confidentiality and the weight of what they witnessed. But what has emerged over the years paints a picture of a woman who understood she was dying and whose final thoughts were of William and Harry, the boys who would grow up without their mother. I tried to comfort her, Dr. Melias reflected years later. I hope she felt comfortable. I hope she heard my words. I don't know if she did, but at least I tried to make her feel better. This sentiment is shared by all the medical professionals who tried to save Diana's life, a sense that they did everything they could, but also a lingering question about whether it was enough. The controversy surrounding some of the alleged final words attributed to Diana, particularly the claims that she accused someone of killing her, has overshadowed the documented words that reveal her true character. Whether she spoke of assassination or not, what is certain is that her final documented words were, "Oh my God, what's happened?" and "Leave me alone," the words of someone trying to understand a tragedy while seeking basic human dignity. Diana's final words have become part of her legacy, revealing a woman who remained concerned about others even as her own life slipped away. They remind us that beneath the royal titles and global fame was a mother who loved her children more than anything else in the world. Today, as William and Harry carry on their mother's charitable work and raise their own children, they live with the knowledge that Diana's final thoughts were of them. The doctors and first responders who heard those words carry them as both a privilege and a burden. They were witnesses to the final moments of the people's princess, and their testimonies ensure that Diana's last words will never be forgotten. If these revelations about Diana's final words moved you, like this video and subscribe for more untold stories that reveal the human side of history's most famous figures. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moments that show us who people really were when everything else was stripped away. Diana's final words remind us that in our last moments, what matters most isn't fame or status. It's love, family, and our connections to others. What do you think your final words would reveal about what matters most to you? Let us know in the comments below.